Welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. This is our thought leadership forum that focuses on organizational effectiveness and the human side of business. My name is Nicole Green, and I serve as the Alumni Engagement Manager for Graziadio, and it's such a pleasure to have you all joining our session today. A few logistical things. The session is being recorded and we will have some event photography taking place. If you are not comfortable being on screen, please feel free to turn your camera off. There may be some engagement opportunities later on where you'll need to maybe unmute yourself or turn your camera on, but I know Jake will talk about that when he gets into his presentation. We also encourage you to follow us on social media. We have Pep Connect, which is a great resource to connect with fellow Graziadio community members, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage you to stay engaged with our school and our community. We also have an optional networking forum. It's unique to our Graziadio alumni events and what we do with the forum. If you choose to participate, I do share the information that you share. So it's your first name, your last name, your email, and your LinkedIn address so that folks can connect with one another after the event via LinkedIn. So I encourage you to look for that form, the link in the chat, and fill that out and stay connected. And then lastly, the chat. The chat is a great place where you can drop your questions as Jake is moving through his presentation today. I will be monitoring the chat and filtering questions to him, and he will move through as many questions as possible with our time together today. All right, so who is Jake Jacobs? He is an individual who spent the past 35 years working with 61 industries, from high tech to manufacturing, to hospitality, to entertainment, to financial services. Wow. He has consulted over 96 organizations, from Fortune 50 companies to national nonprofits and community theaters. He has supported more than 210,000 people directly on important changes for their business, doing everything from strategy implementation to culture change, to mergers and acquisitions and leadership development. Jake partnered with CEOs, frontline workers, and change makers in middle management and organizations in companies like Ford, Kraft, and the Marriott. He also has helped create change in the city of New York, the UK's National Health Science, and the United States Army and Navy. Clients call Jake when they need faster, easier, and better results. Please welcome founder and president of Jake Jacobs Consulting and author of Leverage Change, 8 Ways to Achieve Faster, Easier, and Better Results, today's speaker, MSOD alumnus, Jake Jacobs.
Thank you, Nicole, so much. And it's definitely a pleasure to be here among friends and family from Pepperdine. And as Nicole said, we're going to be focusing on my new book, 8 Ways to Make Any Change Initiative Faster, Easier, and Better. The phone rang. On the other end of it was an irate CEO. He was telling me that he was having problems implementing change in his organization. In fact, he was having so much problems that he had no idea where to turn next. I asked him what the issue was, and he said fundamentally, he had wanted to instill accountability into this organization. He was brought in because there were balls getting dropped, things not getting done, milestones missed, and he said, I need to make sure that people hold up their end of the bargains. So I listened to him for a little bit, and as I went in to work in the organization, something became very clear to me, that the harder he pushed on accountability and the more he thought that was important, he found out, in fact, from me, that that was only one side of the coin, only one hand clapping, because accountability without support is just a sentence. It's just something that you get hit over and over again. And I said to him, I said, what we need to do is provide the support so people can fulfill the accountability that they need. So we started building in all of these different support mechanisms. And for the leadership, there was new training for them, new processes that made it easier to do the work, a whole effort based on support. So I tell that story because the same uncommon wisdom of paying attention to support when all he wanted was accountability is the same kind of uncommon wisdom that these 8 levers are based on that we're going to be looking at today. So what is our purpose? What I'd like to do is make sure that we get some excitement about the leverage change and in particular these levers. And what my promise to you is that not only will you understand what those levers are, but you will leave with at least one idea that's going to help in some change work you're doing. And it will be something that you've got confidence will make a difference, but also you're motivated to take, which is important because you may think it'll make a big difference, but not something that you want to sign up for. So this book, Leverage Change, I just want to say a couple things about it. The concept of leverage came to me 25 years ago in my work. What you can see over my shoulder is actually a picture that I commissioned 25 years ago of a man named Archimedes. And Archimedes was famous because he said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and single-handed I shall move the world." So the concept of leverage is being able to get more done with fewer hassles, headaches, and problems. And so this concept of leverage, you see on the cover of the book, I actually have a few people moving the world. And I believe that you can move your world in the arena of change by using these 8 levers. And if you think about them as strategic actions, smart things to do that on their own are relatively easy. They're not massive investments. You don't need to turn the world upside down to start implementing them. But what they do is that they have a big impact in comparison to the effort that you have to expend. And that's where I think some of the magic comes from. And it goes back to Archimedes, who was a 3rd century BC Greek mathematician. And he was the first one that had a description of what leverage meant. And so I borrowed that for the book and used it throughout. So we're going to start with something called a rapid response consultation. What this is that I have somebody who I'm going to work with. All I'm going to have available to me are the levers. There are 8 of them. And that came out in a pre-mailing to you. And if they didn't, you'll be able to follow afterwards when I do this consultation. Now, any situation's fair game that somebody wants to improve around faster, easier, better results. So I've had a podcast host say to me, "Hey, have you used this on relationships, not just organizations?" And I've said, well, a little in my own relationship, but not expressly. And they were like, well, if you want faster, easier, better results, any situation can work. There's a 5-minute countdown. So this is only going to last 5 minutes. And because of that, interruptions have to be okay. So I will be interrupting this person. It may sound rude. It's not intended to be, but I only have 5 minutes to work. Answer questions that they're comfortable with. So they can say, I don't want to answer that question. That's fair game. They may not want to for a lot of reasons. My request is for those of you who got the pre-read on this that has 8 levers, be listening to see which of those I might be using at a different point in time during this 5 minutes. If you didn't get the pre-read, that's okay. Listen to the questions and start jotting down some that seem interesting to you. And then what I'm going to do is ask you to hold the questions. And then after this, we'll do a quick debrief with the person I'm working with. And then I'll describe all 8 levers in some detail and ask you, which did you see at play in the rapid response consultation and what difference did you see them make? So this is kind of a deductive way to do it. I've said to people that you can either root for me and hope that I get something useful done because the goal is an idea for this person, or if you happen to have the devilish side on you, you could, of course, root against me silently and hope that this person does not get insight and wisdom. That's up to you. Now, one of the things that I've done is I have asked an MSOD fellow grad, Gina Lavery, to be the person that I work with. And I did that just so she could prepare her thinking, knowing that I was going to be doing this. I must admit, typically I don't know anything about what's going on in this person's situation. Gina and I had a short chat yesterday because she wanted to make sure that what we were working on was substantive enough to warrant this consultation. And since anything's fair game, Gina's qualified. So what I'm going to do is ask Nicole if she can spotlight Gina and myself for our 5 minutes of fun and intense consulting. And we'll see how well I do. And if you would ask other questions, then mark those down for yourself. So I see Gina off to the side. Hello, how are you, Gina?
Great.
Good, you're eager, I can tell.
Be nice to me, Jake.
You be nice to me, Gina. All right. But let's have some fun and see if we can make some progress. So what I have here is a timer that's just started. So I have 5 minutes. Gina, tell me, what is your situation? Who's involved in this?
So the situation, there's two situations. They kind of have a similar theme. One was a future search that I did back in February.
Yep.
And it had multiple consultants. And then another is a team development session I'm going to be having in 2 weeks. But what's
the issue that's common in these?
Yeah, the issue that's common is getting the consultants and the main sponsor on the same page. So
okay, so you've had the experience in the past, you've had this issue and
yes,
you're concerned about having it again.
Yes, because
first yeah. Question, Gina, that I have you
sure.
had success with this in the past in situations?
Yes, but it takes a lot of education.
So education has been a key to this in the past. That's something to hold on to. Were you able to educate the person the last time that you did this?
Yes.
And do you have an opportunity to educate this person?
I've been trying.
Okay, fair enough. And also, one of the things that I believe is that data speaks. So a lot of times reality will help people make smarter decisions. Is there anything that you could talk about with this person coming up that would help educate them either about their own organization or information you might collect from people to be able to share with them?
I don't really see that opportunity except for the fact that we did work together last August, like a similar leadership offsite, and the pressures always comes down to how many days we're going to work together. It's always about clients and customers think you can do everything in half the time that you think.
Right. And we talked about this. So I'm going to jump
go back and forth.
And this is one of the issues that all consultants will deal with.
Yes.
And so one of the questions that I have is it clear what the purpose is of the work that you're supposed to be doing?
Yes.
All right. Now, I have another question for you, which is, would it be possible for you to go smaller rather than larger? So right now, you're wrestling with this person about, could I get more? What would happen if you said, actually, I want less? Let's make this smaller.
That's what we did. So what I ended up doing is made it smaller. I took out some of the outcomes. I eliminated some coaching for one of her leaders, and I made it smaller. So
so I have another suggestion for you, Gina.
Which is,
how might you go about making it micro? So take what you've let go of that feels like it's, selling your soul a little bit, getting less. And if you went micro and you said, no, let me make this even smaller, easier for this person to say yes to, but even smaller, what might you suggest to this person?
I have to think about that. I mean, I would suggest a day with her team to focus on the top 2 or 3 priorities with a tiny check in the next morning just to capture those overnight thoughts.
Yeah.
So like maybe 2 hours, because I'm gonna have to spend the night anyway. So it's not really,
Right,
But
so it's a
that,
travel and logistics issue.
yeah,
Is
it's not
this
a
something-
logistics issue.
Is this something that you think she would be proud of in terms of making it
Yes.
smaller and actually getting it done? How about the people that she's working with? How might they feel about this?
Well, what the opportunity is then to give her back the rest of the second day for her
Yeah.
to focus and to work on things that came up in the first day as
Yep.
a team, right?
So
So
they would be able
without
to
me,
work on an agenda that got set up by the work you were doing.
correct?
And that would be something that would be really helpful for them.
Yes.
Okay, I want to know what might be her concern with that approach.
I don't know if she's going to have any concerns.
So right
mean-
now, what concerns does she have with your approach that you've been taking?
It was just she didn't want to pay. She didn't want to pay for 2 full days of consulting.
Okay,
And I don't want to leave her with just one day because of that time. That overnight time is so critical for once they come in the next day. So
Right.
harvesting what comes up for them overnight and then creating a really good action plan for the rest of their work together would be of huge value to her. So does that mean we flamed out or we flamed
no, that means
forward?
that we're done with our 5 minutes. So that means that we're done.
Okay,
So
good.
what I want to do is just a quick immediate debrief with you before I go through the levers and just ask,
All right.
how did that go for you? What did it feel like? Were there any takeaways? Was there any insight? Like what happened?
Yeah. Yeah, what I really like is the concept of going smaller and then even going micro, because I want to really, give people the most immersive, transformative experience possible in the time allotted. And maybe that's too much. Maybe it's biting off too much. And if we just actually made progress on some
You can make
really
some
key,
really solid and
Yeah.
significant progress
That
on a
would be enough.
smaller piece, which
Yeah.
paradoxically may open up the possibilities for a larger piece. And at least they'll be doing a larger piece on their own the next day.
Totally. Yeah, I like going micro a lot. I think that really was
Okay. So
important.
here's what I'm going to do. First of all, let's thank Gina. Thank you very much. Let's see those hands up in the air. Very good. It's a risk to get in front of people. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to go through these levers very quickly so that you can get a sense of what they are. And my question to you is, how did you see me using them and what difference did you see them make? So here are the 8 levers. The first one, each of these 8 levers, I should say as well, deals with a particular problem that I think is common that people and organizations bump up against when they're trying to create change. Now, these levers can be used at the individual level for team issues, like if I have a problem with a colleague, if I have to set up a team meeting, or if I need to transform an entire organization, these levers all work the same. If I have an existing model that I'm using, these levers can turbocharge it. So you don't have to stop what you're doing to start using the levers. They are meant to support you in all the work that you've already done. So each of them deals with a problem. This first one deals with too much change and change fatigue. So here you see Ann Aguirre saying, even if the old situation sucked, at least I know what it is. I actually have had a client say this to me, right? It was lousy, but it was predictable. So the story that I have around this one is a hospitality organization. And what they did as they went about changing was they said, look, let's find out all the things that we've done well in the past that we want to hold on to. So most people who deal with change, like us, right, talk about change, they write about change, they work on change. And what I'm saying from a leverage change standpoint is, I'm also going to pay attention to what not to change. And I think it's equally important that I tip my cap to Barry Johnson, who's a buddy of mine for about 30 years now. And his paradoxical approach to change or polarity thinking is where this comes from. And there's more of that written in the book. But what they said was, let's talk about all the things not to change. So I've even had clients build lists of everything that needs to change in the organization. And as they build that list, they slump down in the chairs a little bit more. It's a little less empowering. And Then I say, let's make a list of everything that's going to stay the same, except this time make it twice as long. And as they start building this list of continuity, what I believe is it gives people a firmer ground to take a leap into the unknown of what that future is. So there are really good reasons to pay attention to continuity. The next lever is to think and act as if the future were now. Now, these are all versions of PCs that have you waiting, right? There's a Mac on the right, the Windows on the left. And what this deals with, this lever, is change being too slow. So a lot of people are frustrated that change is so slow. And so what I have said is there is a flawed paradigm about the way we think about the future. I got this from a man named Stan Davis, who wrote a book called Future Perfect. What he talked about was thinking and acting as if the future were now. So what does this mean? What do I mean by flawed paradigm? Normally, when we think of the future, we think of it as something that will occur at a later point in time. This is the present, that's the future. And we don't arrive at the future until we get there. So if I have a vision 2022, when I do it well, things will be the way they are desired in 2022. What I'm saying here is get an image of 2022 and then think and act as if you were already there. If I were in that future, what decisions would I make? What people would be involved? How would I make decisions, right? What would my goals and vision be if I already were there where I wanted to be 2 years from now? So I had a retail client that I was working with that wanted a participative culture. We were working with the senior team and they were trying to figure out how to gain new market share. And so they spent the morning, most of the morning, arguing among themselves about how to do this and had come up with 2 solutions. And I said to them, you know, you said you wanted a more participative organization. What if we made that real today? Who would be in the room? And they said, well, you know, the regional salespeople, even the frontline salespeople would have some insight into this. And so I said, all right, let's get them. And they got their calendars out and they started scheduling next week's meeting and they were going to contact these people. And I said to them, no, I mean, now, if you want participation, then start participating. Go and invite those people after the morning break and let's get them in the room. And they said, well, not everybody's in the office. I said, well, get the people in the office in the room and get everybody else on the phone. But let's get the knowledge in the room that's needed to make good decisions. And so in doing that, what they found is that neither of the solutions they'd come up with were the ones that they went with. There was a third solution that came out of this that came only from the information from people that previously were not there, but they started being participative in the moment. So any image that you have of the future is fair game to start living today. And when you do that, the pace of change accelerates because it's hard to tell, am I in the future or am I in the present? And when that line gets fuzzy, I actually think that's a good thing. And it's also paradoxical. I don't have to wait for the future now. I'm living it today. So that's the second lever. Design it yourself. So these are all different models, and I could have put even more up about change models and approaches to bringing about change. There are many of them, and many of them are very helpful. So I'm not here to argue against existing models. What I am here to say is that I believe that when people say, have you done this work here? Have you worked in my industry? Have you worked in my size organization? Right? Those questions are a form of resistance against your approach. And I say that's legitimate. It's actually not a problem that people are pushing back. It's healthy. And that in the end of the day, each organization's change effort needs to be unique to their circumstances. And so rather than getting, in my way, stuck into a preconceived model, take what's worked from the past and build the rest yourself so that your purpose, your outcomes, your roadmap, these are all things that you're creating based on your realities and your ownership. So I was working with a transportation company. We had a situation that they had to decide where they were providing transportation, how, and to whom. There's like 3 variables, and they're scenario planning. They're different permutations of those. And so we tried to figure out, how can we do this by designing it ourselves? Like, there's something that we didn't have to pull off the wall. The mechanic who was on our planning team said, this is like Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. And everybody looked at this person and said, what the heck are you talking about? And he said, well, you know, they're different ears and there's a different nose and they're different eyes. And we can put different pieces together and get different potato heads based on these eyes, ears, and noses. And so what he did is he created a way for everybody to understand scenario planning, which is actually a pretty complex process. And you've got to go back into the books to figure it out. But he figured out how to design it for themselves for that organization. So design it yourself. This one, create a common database, talks about what information is needed for people to make good decisions. So the first story borrowed from this as well, because what the common database there was had to do with information about the sales regions and the people on the front lines that the executives didn't have available. So a common database is anything that others need to know that you may know. So I do these LinkedIn videos called Jake on Change, and one of them was about, do you have a secret that somebody else needs to hear? Because I may not be doing it on purpose to withhold that information, but to the extent to which I can, you end up with people who are senior executives looking at the front line and saying, why don't they get it? I mean, this is the direction. Why do they keep behaving this way? And people on the front lines look and they say, why do those senior executives have their head in the clouds? If you can figure out what information needs to be shared, then everybody can be smarter and make better decisions. And there's more freedom in the organization to operate. Because when we've got the common database, we all know the same things. It's true that reasonable people exposed to reasonably the same information will come up with reasonably the same conclusions. So just a quick story on this one was an energy company, and they had a merger where they had floating interest rates, convertible bonds, very complicated financial transactions to make this merger work. But the key was they needed to make it work fast. And so what they did, instead of like telling people it has to be fast, what they did, we had summits of 250 people, but they educated people in a mini MBA that were engineers, that were roustabouts, but they gave them the information and the education so that they could make good decisions themselves. And once they understood how much money could be saved by closing this deal and getting things up and running faster, it made sense to everybody why they should push harder and push faster. Start with impact, follow the energy. So what this one says is often a lot of people say start from the top. A lot of books will say that. This is Moses, supposedly on the left, bringing the commandments down from the mountaintop. There are other people who talk about a bottom-up approach, and they say it needs to be grassroots, and that's what the answer should be. And then there are questions about, should you go top down? Should you go bottom up? Do you start in the middle? Do you start where? Well, from a leverage change standpoint, we start where there's impact and then we follow the energy. So what is impact? It's where you can make a difference. And in each organization, that's going to be different. So for example, you may start where it's easiest because getting the ball rolling is going to send a message that that organization needs to hear. You may start where it's going to be hardest, because that'll send a message that this is serious business and we're going to take on the tough challenges. But where you have impact, I learned this from Myron Rogers and adapted it some, but what he was talking about was start anywhere, be willing to go everywhere. So when you start and you make impact, then where's the energy? And I had somebody on a podcast say, well, how do you know where the energy is? I said, you know, different times, different places. When people are asking questions, when people are resisting, negative energy still counts. And you can tap into that and make some remarkable things happen. So it's not always where people are gung-ho. It may be where you have the biggest resistors. But following the energy means that you design it yourself. You don't even necessarily have to have the plan locked in to start the work. You need to know where there's impact. to start the work and then pay attention to what needs to be done next. And I'm not saying don't have a plan, because you always can have a plan. But one of my mentors, Barbara Bunker, taught me structure is helpful. It gives you something to deviate from. For all of you out there that like to deviate. Develop a future people will want to call their own. This deals with the problem of what I call what's in it for me. And what's in it for me, even in my clients, have an acronym. They love acronyms, all organizations, and they call it with them. What's in it for me? And that question often gets seen as something that's selfish. What I believe is it's not selfish. It's actually human nature. And it's a smart question to ask. And if I can't find something in the future that's going to help satisfy my needs, then I'm not going to be motivated to work on that future. I'm not stupid. I want to find something that's going to help me as well. So what this is saying is, if you develop a future that people will want to call their own, they're going to want to create that future. So I'm not worried about what's in it for me. If I see a future that's motivating and that's engaging and that's empowering, then I'm going to choose that future. And this what's in it for me comes off the table as an issue. And having people create their collective future is an even more powerful way to do this. So rather than being told what your future is, being asked and being consulted and being engaged in the conversation about it is where it makes a difference. So I found that being able to develop a future is something that motivates people. So here's a manufacturing client I'm working with. They've got a planning team or a design team that's planning their change effort. And there's a guy who's standing in the doorway. His name was Joe. He refused to sit down in the meeting. So when I say he had his feet outside the change process, he literally had his feet outside the change process. And when we worked through the morning, and he saw that it was something that people were going to create themselves and that they would be proud of, he came at lunch and he sat down next to me and I said, how'd the morning go? And he said, fine. And I didn't confront him about why he was standing in the hallway. I sort of knew. But when I asked him, where are you going to be this afternoon? He said, at the table. I said, why? And he said, because we're creating this future for ourselves, not just for the executives. And we're not getting rolled over, which is what he called rollouts, but we're going to be rolling with the whole organization going forward. He ended up being one of the biggest supporters of the effort in the whole company, actually started a whole change leadership group. So rather than being a sponsor, being somebody who's way up in the hierarchy that has a lot of resources, he started getting change sponsors throughout the organization at every level. So develop a future people will want to call their own is another lever. As I'm going through these, I'm inviting you again to go back and think about the conversation I had with Gina and where some of these showed up and how they showed up. So this next one is dealing with what people have to do on a daily basis and only being able to do that work, as opposed to a solution where there are opportunities for people to make a meaningful difference. So I don't think there's anything wrong with people doing their day job and doing an excellent job of it. I mean, that's sort of required for an organization to excel. And in the world of change, there are some unique opportunities. There are some opportunities there to make a lasting impact, to make a legacy, to put your stamp in the organization and say, I helped make this happen. So what is this meaningful difference? It's not staring at each other and saying, this guy must be awfully bored. He's doing the same thing day after day. But what it means is that you look for opportunities for people to make a profound difference. And then you send an invitation, a personal request to those people or that person to be able to help in a way that they know is meaningful. And if you're stuck trying to figure out what that is, ask people what would be a meaningful contribution for them to make, and they will tell you. I believe they know. And when you get into conversations about making meaningful contributions, it's a different kind of conversation. It's a more substantial conversation that taps into people's heart as well as their head. Because when I make a difference that's lasting, it's something that I'm invested in a different way than I am getting the quarterly numbers. So this one happened to be an entertainment company, another story. And we were working across the whole organization. And what we did in this one situation was we're trying to figure out, how do we get this mission, vision, and values throughout a 37,000 person organization? I mean, we had done a pretty good job of engaging people. About 2,000 people had had their hands in some way in shaping this direction for the future. But there was a woman in one division, in one department, that had an idea. And she said, what if we have at every meeting, because they had huddles at the beginning of every day. That's one of the things that was part of their culture. She said, what if in the huddles, we take a value every month and we have conversations about that value? So we talked with her and we thought, this has got some promise. And we came up with 3 very simple questions. Design it yourself. I've never asked these questions in any other organization, and I haven't asked them since. But what the questions were is, what does this value mean to you? Where have you already seen it in action in this organization? And how can we live it better in our team going forward? So simple questions, but a profound difference. And for this woman, she became known in a 37,000 person organization because she stepped up with an idea that people ran with. And as they had these conversations, they came up with real, meaningful actions to them and to their own work, which again, all was aligned because it was based on a common database. Everybody knew where they were headed. They had the same values. The question became, how do we live them in our own way, in our own unique application for our work and who we work with and what we do? So find opportunities. Here's the last one. The last one is one of the more unique ones because you can use it on its own. One question is, which levers work? And this one works when people are saying, I've got too much on my plate, like this woman with the green hair. And the other woman saying, well, I got a solution for you, get a bigger plate. So if you've ever been in an organization where people say, I have too much on their plate, this lever was designed to address that. And what does it look like? It looks like taking change work and making it part of your daily work. So here's an example. This one I picked out from a healthcare organization. And we were working, in this case, with the senior team again. And in the work with them, they decided that their meetings, I'm going to shock you, were lousy. They were unproductive. They were frustrating. They took too long. They never finished the agenda. People had slides like me and they never got through them. And then they raced through the last 10 slides like every meeting. And so they decided that they were going to have a sub-team work on getting their meetings together. Well, one of the things that we did, since I was working with them, is that we made sure we had purpose and outcomes for every meeting. Now, this was something that the senior team was going to do, and they actually made a rule. They said, if they don't get a purpose and outcomes with the agenda out 24 hours before a meeting, you don't have to go to the meeting. So the first 2 times people sent out agendas, they didn't have purpose and outcomes, and people didn't show up to their meetings. And that sent a message that we're serious about this. But the interesting part of the story for me was this started to catch hold in the organization. And as the senior leaders went out to have meetings, they said, well, let's have purpose and outcomes for it. And as they started to launch projects and initiatives, they said, let's have purpose and outcomes for it. So what began as change work became part of daily work. And everything in the organization started to shift around purpose and outcomes, which is a good thing. It's a results-oriented way, rather than a lot of agendas get set by people sending in agenda items, right? Everybody sends in, and then there's no purpose for the meeting other than let's tell each other about our agenda items. But it's not a meaningful use of time. And I would argue it's not a very good use of time. So finding ways to make change work part of daily work. even if you're doing team building, what happens if you don't go offsite? What if you say, we're going to do this team development as part of our regular work? It starts to trigger a different way of thinking about how you can do that work. Like I said to Gina, it's like a micro approach. What can we do today to have a more effective team in the meeting we're having right now? Okay, that starts to make change work part of daily work. And it gets easier because people win. And when people win, they look around and they see people succeeding, which again becomes a virtuous cycle. You get more motivation to try things as you see other people succeeding. So those are the levers. Now, my question, which I'm going to ask you, and we can unmute people in the room and you could raise hands, which is, now that you've heard what those levers are in a little more detail, which ones did you see at play in the work I did with Gina? And what impact did they have? Like what was helpful there? And you may have seen, boy, I wish you'd have used this lever now that I know about it. I think it would have been helpful because there may have been some that I missed. So if you raise a hand, and then we'll get the mics undone. And if you speak just with answers, but make them shorter rather than longer, we'll be able to get more people's voices heard.
Perfect. I see Paul's hand. Go ahead, Paul, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or maybe dialogue about some of the questions you dropped into the chat.
Yeah, for sure. And quick shout out to Gina. The hot seat was so hot that it burst into flames. So great job to Gina and Jake for that excellent real life example. Jake, thank you so much. Drinking from a fire hose here, but a couple gulps that I got was that you created a common database, really leaned into the design it yourself piece, especially with that prompt around what's small, what's micro. And that's the slurp of water that I'll share for right now.
Thanks, Paul. What about anybody else? What did they see? And Gina, you're fair game to go in. Carly, you've got a hand up.
Yeah, hi, thanks. The one I really liked was when I heard her talk about the female executive who was just having a little bit of conflict around the 2-day event rather than something smaller, not wanting to pay for it, maybe not even wanting to take the amount of time. You seem to focus on helping her develop a future that executive would want to embrace as her own. So I thought the micro approach worked really well to that. Because I could see how a 1 day might really make her realize that this is doable, this is worth the time and effort. So I liked that. If we can help people make them think it's their idea, I think it's always a valuable approach.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And one of the things, Paul's got his thumb up as well. One of the things that is sometimes hard is that as we're working with people and it gets frustrating, it's hard to keep cheering for them, right? They end up feeling like they're on the other side of the fence, sort of pushing against you as you're pushing for them. So one of the other pieces of common database is letting people know you're on their side. So how do you find ways for people that you're having trouble with? It's like, wait, how can I make that person win with whatever competition they're running? Because that starts a positive momentum and the ball rolling as well. And so that whole notion of common database, I think, shows up. It's like, well, no, these are my feelings for you. It becomes a more personal relationship and they feel more supported. Great. How about anybody else? Hands in the air. Gina's got hers up.
Yeah, so I'm now that I'm seeing the levers, I think there was some pay attention to continuity in there because she did this retreat last August. She has a new member, so there was a need to do it. They've reorged their organization. So I think referring back to that really helped because I did pull out what people said about the last time together. So to reassure her that it was a good investment, basically. But I also see, I agree with the design it yourself, because she was giving me these clues, right? She was giving me these clues about like that they've been doing work together since last August. And I think they like to work by themselves. They don't need to be led through everything with the consultant. So I'm now feeling even better about our outcome, like the outcome of me just staying over and doing a short morning session. Because I think letting them loose with the rest of their day will feel like a big value added to them. like that they're not with a consultant, right, going through these
Right.
exercises, even though they had a great experience. So
Yeah.
I'm really loving that one as well.
And I will build on what Gina said, because pay attention to continuity. I snuck a question in very early because I said, well, have you had any successes in doing this in the
Yeah.
past? And she was like, well, I have. And so I was like, well, tell me more about that, because it's not just the client's successes with it, but Gina's own successes, because who is the client in this work right now was more Gina for me, right, than it was her client, because that's the person she's working with. Other comments, thoughts, insights, questions?
Paul here again. I really appreciated the timer and having that agreement as you went into it. Hey, I'm going to be an interrupting cow. If you've
I
heard
didn't
that,
use the word cow, but keep going, Paul.
yeah, the if you've ever heard that joke of an interrupting cow, I'll share that later. But that you put the 5 minutes on the clock, and then where there were these opportunities to diverge and give these super enriching, wonderful details, you're like, "Yep, I've got the essence. Let's go back in here." And that focus with the clock created that commitment to each other that we're going to go deep and we're going to do this very quickly. And I really was impressed with that.
Yeah, and the thing that I have to admit is, sometimes those deep, rich details might have been a key to unlock the kingdom, right? I don't know either, but what I do know is I've got 8 levers, and so I'm pushing and choosing between them and seeing, where might there be an opening, and I'm watching Gina to see what's working for her, because at the end of the day, she has to be motivated to do something that's going to be helpful. All right, last call for any comments on this before we go into the next piece. Oh, there's a hand raised. I just saw. Golnaz.
Oh, hi, Jake. I really liked how you said to start with impact and follow the energy, and to work outside of the lines, just to sort of see what happens. It is always interesting to follow the energy. And I love that you said that. And I made a note of that. And also about think and act as if we're in the future now. And that was very impactful, both of those things.
Cool. We're going to get to play with that one in just a minute. So I agree. I think that one opens up a lot of possibilities. Anything else that people have in terms of input on that or questions? Okay. So this is a piece of work for you to do. And what we're going to do is say, take a few minutes, think about your answers to these questions, and write some bullet points down. So first, you've got to identify some situation. And I would encourage you, choose one that's going to make a difference. I mean, it's any situation. It could be personal, it could be professional, but something that involves change where there would be a payoff for you. And then just jot down what that is. You don't need to do any more. You don't need to get into who's involved and what their role is and what your role, just the situation. So for Gina, it was working with this client who wants to do less and I want to do more. That's her situation. Based on this, what could better look like in the future? So for Gina, she may have said, us being strong partners committed to a common cause. And then, given that picture, what's one action that you would take immediately to demonstrate you're living in that future now? So this is the think and act as if the future were now lever we're going to put to work for you on some situation. So for example, if we were going down that path with Gina, we went down a different one, but if we were going down that path with Gina, it may have been that we're going to sit down and develop a picture of a year out when we're both pleased and proud of the progress that this team has made. And then how would I start doing that today? Well, I might actually ask that person what would make them most pleased and proud about this next day. So you see how I'm taking what would be true in the future and moving it what I call upstream to today and saying, what's the action I could take today that would be in line with that future that I'm envisioning. Does anybody have any questions on the task? All right, so I'm actually going to do a silent part of the webinar, give you a chance to think, jot down some notes, and then we're going to check in with some people. Okay, I want to just ask if anybody would like to volunteer questions and insight. So, and if we have the same brave souls, that's cool. And if we have some new brave souls, that's also cool. But what is it that you came out of that conversation with yourself? What occurred to you? What happened? Carly's up.
I'll be brave. Well, one of the big challenges I have right now, I manage a project management office, is we're designing a new end-to-end system that will hopefully go into some sort of an application for managing our projects. And it's a couple of challenges. Executive alignment and adoption are two, of course, challenges, I think, with so many different efforts. Better could look like if everyone was at least using the same road mapping tool, which would be the beginning step of this new end-to-end process. And so as I was thinking about some of the things that the levers that you've discussed, we've already asked people to contribute ways that they can provide some impact and make a meaningful difference. So I think that's good. We've already taken a look at what could provide meaningful impact, which is by identifying the roadmap as a starting point. And we've done that in a couple of other ways as well. So I think that could help give us some traction. So at least this exercise gave me a little bit of confidence, Jake, that we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I'll be sure to review some of these other levers and see how I can help push us, across the finish line. But yeah, this was good. Thank you.
Great. So that's what I would like to finish with in terms of leaving on the screen, Nicole, and hand it back over to you then.
We're grateful. Thank you. Thank you for the conversation, and to those who were brave enough to share and speak out. Really great insight. This has just been a great day, I think, for all of us to kind of spend a moment of really understanding what leveraging that perspective is. So thank you for sharing that. But thank you for this afternoon. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for attending the session. We'll see you again soon.